Welcome to Fraudulent Feelings with Fatima podcast, where we dive into real conversations that shape our professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Fatima Nash, and today we're exploring a topic that so many of us wrestle with, yet rarely discuss openly: imposter syndrome. Have you ever felt like you're not good enough, like your success is a result of luck, or that you don't truly deserve your accomplishments? You're not alone. Imposter syndrome impacts high achievers, leaders, professionals at all levels, and even the ones who seem to have it all together. In this episode, we'll break down what imposter syndrome is, how it sneaks into our mindset, and most importantly, how you can push back against it. Together, we'll share insights, stories, and actionable strategies to help you embrace your worth and own your success. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Fraudulent Feelings with Fatima, Imposter Wealth. I have my newest friend, Melanie Perry. She is here with us to educate us all about having fraud feelings and building your wealth. Melanie, I'll pause and allow you to introduce yourself to my gang.
Yes, well, it is a joy and a pleasure to be honored to be interviewed, to have this very important conversation, particularly now. So just a little tidbit, because I want to get into the nitty gritty of our conversation today, but I know I don't look it, black don't crack, but I've been in the industry for the past 25 years, straight out of college. Yes, indeed. And my degree is in quantitative economics. So right when I graduated from college, I jumped right into the financial services industry. Back when you looked for employment in a newspaper, which my mom handed me, it's like, I was interviewing everywhere and used the newspaper to find this job. And one of the things that I began to recognize very early on is that from the seminars that I was providing and the workshops that I was offering, the PowerPoint presentations that the compliance department allowed me to use, I had to explain in between the slides. So I couldn't just use the content and keep it pushing. There was a level of financial literacy that my demographic just didn't have. And so I was explaining the explanation of the explanation as I'm going through the presentation, right? And so I would say within the first 2 or 3 years of me, getting started, naturally I work with, my friends and family, so 20-year-olds and some, 60 and 70-year-olds. I recognize, okay, so I've got to help my folks kind of not get back, but understand the basics. And then I would say within about 10 years, I was so full of one experience, knowledge, the application of the knowledge, and so full of so many people's stories and their trials and triumphs and tribulations when it comes to their finances that I had to put it in a book. So I created a book called All About the Benjamins, helping people create sustainable wealth in the midst of financial insanity. And that was around 2008. And during the dot-com bubble, we were in another, insanity, crisis. And here we are again. So we seem to keep kind of repeating the story. And the contents of my books remains the same, because wealth, the definition of wealth, is the same no matter what era you're in. And I know we're going to talk about that in more detail. So as a result of the book, people were asking me, well, do you have anything for the kids? And I'm like, well, I'm teaching you to teach the kids. So next thing I know is I'm teaching a class for elementary kids at Marcus Garvey School here in Los Angeles. And I had a whole proposal for the 7th and 8th graders, and she's like, but I want you to teach the babies. And I'm like, kindergartners, 1st and 2nd graders? And she's like, yes. I'm like, okay. So, I started watching Sesame Street with a different purpose now, because I love Elmo. And I was like, okay, so kids like storytelling, right? So then I was creating songs and, having all kind of, tactical activities for them to begin to understand the concept of money, of finance, and how it works. And I was having just as much fun as they were. And the interesting thing was that I learned from that experience is that in the very beginning, I did an intro to all the different classes and I said, okay, so what do you know about money? And they were like, spend it. So I'm like, okay, all right. Okay, you spend money. I was like, well, what else do you do with money? And it got kind of quiet and they said other ways of spending it and all that kind of thing. And I said, well, how about invest? And they're like, oh, investigate? I said, no. Invest. And they're like, investigator? I was like, no. So I'm writing it on the board. INVEST. That's it. Invest. Nothing more, right? And they're like, So they'd never heard the word before.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard the word. So
Mm-hmm.
I taught them over the course of 8 weeks. There was a Christmas break in between. Once a week for an hour, I went to each one of the classes. By the end of that 8-week time period, I said, okay, what do we do with money? They said, invest, save, spend, and in that order. So within a short period of time, you can completely change the trajectory of our young people when you speak to them on their language on their level, right? So they're listening to mommy and daddy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And cousins and aunties.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as we're having conversations, with them that help them with the exposure and the understanding that wealth is more than just money, we're going to talk about that, but understanding that it's just a tool and it allows you opportunity and flexibility. So that's a long intro.
I love that.
That gives you
No,
some
it's the
context.
best intro.
Education is very important
Yes, it
in
is.
my practice and in my financial literacy company.
Yes, I love that so much. That was the best intro. Because even though kindergartners and first graders like storytelling, adults love a good story. So I was paying attention and nodding and visualizing you in front of the invest. And so I love that. So thank you for that. One of the focuses that I have in building my practice is to beat down what I'm calling fraud feelings and having imposter syndrome, right? And what I visualize very quickly in the dialogue is, man, that is so awesome that those students were able to grasp that. But I don't know if me as the parent would be able to grasp it because I'd be too concerned about the here and now. And so when we think about investing, saving, and what was the order again? And it was
Invest,
invest,
save,
save,
spend.
spend. So when I think about the invest and save and spend, what floats to the top for many folks in my community and many folks in my family that look like me is the spend. And we're not talking about spending on diamonds and Mercedes. We're talking about paying the light bill. We're talking about getting those groceries. We're talking about the basic needs. So as I grew up, first generation everything, I learned a little later in life about the invest, save, and spend. But still, as I learned that, I had very strong feelings of I don't deserve to understand about investing. I don't make enough money to save, so what am I saving? I might as well spend it because I only have one life. I can't take it with me. These are all the things that I grew up hearing, right? Living below the poverty line. So as I grew up and we seemingly grew up around the same time frame and graduated high school around the same time frame, I quickly learned after college the importance of the invest, the save, and the spend. But it took a lot of trials and tribulations and a lot of me being super nervous and feeling worthy that I could earn enough to invest, save, and spend. So I'd love to go into that a little bit. Can you relate to that? Do you think there's fraud feelings when it comes to wealth building when you don't have a background in it? Like, help me out here.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about the insecurities around money when it comes to people of color is that it's the best magic trick that the man has put on us, because we know the story. We come from kings, queens, and warriors, and no group of people is ever going to seek out another group of people that is incompetent, ignorant, and incapable. Now, in order to do the double whammy there, you have to make them feel that. Otherwise, how can you keep them caged? And that has to happen over generation after generation over generation, right? And then you have to keep the keys to the secret, the kingdom, so to speak, a secret. When in actuality, we were actually the ones that created these types of infrastructures, not for evil, but for good, not for hoarding, but to add value.
That's the community, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I have experienced that in my career as a financial advisor. And, I got to tell you something. It took me 10 years to get my certified financial planning designation. Now, part of it was because that exam was grueling. When I started, it was 10 days. It was, 10 hours over the course of 2 days, multiple choice. And financial planning is subjective, right? Just because you may think that saving 10,000 a month is good for you, investing here is better for there's all different ways to get to the end goal, right? Mm-hmm. But what are the test takers, saying that the answer is? That's a whole different story. But I never gave up. And so while I was working full time, in business, it wasn't a 9 to 5 where I knew my check was coming on the 1st and the 15th. I'm in sales, Mm-hmm. So I had to balance, working, studying for such a grueling exam, and being amongst a sea of salt and a little bit of pepper, and maybe some mm-hmm. paprika was in there too. Mm-hmm. So you're amongst, a demographic, it's just not a lot of people of color, period, mm-hmm. Seeking that designation. More are, but it's like 2% out of the, mm-hmm. The population. So I was constantly talking to myself, to recognize that although I'm struggling, although I'm having a challenge with this, and I just said my degree's in quantitative economics, which sounds, really hefty, right. But I scraped and scrubbed my degree getting out of there.
Yeah.
I scooted out of there like, whoo, I don't want to look back, right?
Right.
And, so there's expectations, family expectations, and, mm-hmm. Your friends mm-hmm. are, trucking along and moving along, and, it's kind of like, all right, my day will come.
Right.
And
right,
I actually began to seek out the CFP because, like many Black women, we're the most educated group of people in the world. We have all kind of acronyms after our names, from BA, BS, MBA, CFP.
Yes.
Yes. Right?
Yes.
But yet we don't make the money equal to those that have half of what the education that we have. And a great mm-hmm. deal of that is because we're told you're not worthy of this, you don't deserve that, or subliminally, we experience that. Just in the television that we watch, the commercials that we see, we're in the shadows, or the roles that we're playing are subservient or abusive or manipulative. And whether we are, like consciously aware of it, we're getting these reinforced subliminal messages, which add to, well, let me go back
I'm not good enough. That's right.
Yeah, let me get a little bit extra more. And then Bobby, who doesn't know next to nothing, is the CEO. And it's like, well, how did that happen?
Absolutely.
What do you need to do to get in that position? Now, there's
Absolutely.
racism and prejudice. There's all those factors too.
All those factors, right?
Yes, not to dismiss that, but definitely recognizing we are all born wealthy. Every single last human on this planet is born wealthy. No one is better, no one is worse, but we're all born wealthy. And when we understand and act in that vein and begin to shed off expectations from society, expectations from our parents, from our siblings, even the position of the family that we're in. I'm the youngest. So my parents weren't as strict as they were with my sister, you know, and then my sister and I were 7 years apart. So, the first child, has all the responsibility and the expectation. The middle child, is a little, and then the last child is like, well, they can do whatever, footloose, fancy free. But it's that youngest child that's typically the most creative because they weren't constrained, and they were able to just kind of be there because they had these safety nets, which is good and not so good, right? So just so that I don't get too far off from the imposter syndrome question, it's a matter of us recognizing again, one, I'm wealthy, you're wealthy, we are wealthy, and knowing that as long as we understand and master our craft, we recognize our skill, we know what our gifts are. When we know that and we know that we're good, because you can compare yourself to others without judgment because you're looking at the marketplace and you're making an assessment, which is different than comparing yourself to kind of put yourself on a level or lack thereof, right? But when you know that you have more skills, more qualifications, more insight, more degrees, more knowledge than someone else that's lacking, then you need to act accordingly.
Absolutely. That's the answer.
Period.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. High fives. And I'm listening as you're talking, and I'm thinking about the responses that could come or the questions that may come up, right? And the first question that came to mind was, I wasn't born wealthy. What gifts do I have? And one of the challenges in that is baked in what you said about the cycle, what we see and what we experience. But there are ways to break that cycle, and identifying what your special gifts are is to me, the very first step. Absolutely. Because that response that I made up, probably because I said it in my head a lot of times, too many times, I react that way because I'm scared and I'm insecure, but deep down inside, I know I have something. That's what made me react that way, because I know it's there. I'm embarrassed that I'm not using it. That's why I'm reacting that way. And so for all of you that are out there listening, especially at this such very critical time for us, you have to start brainstorming what your gifts are. Start paying attention to the things that you do better than most. And it's not a comparison, it's just data gathering, right?
Absolutely. So that's a very good point. One of the questions that I encourage people to ask when I'm doing workshops is to just, list what are some things that you like doing that you would do for free. I mean, it could be baking cakes, making jewelry, talking, the gift, the gab, right?
Yes.
Connecting, knowing a lot of people, networking, because there's wealth in your network, right? Connection is currency. So it doesn't have to be like a physical skill, how to sew well, or how to make purses or lipstick or whatnot. It could be your energy, your personality, how you glow, when you walk in the room and a person just gravitates towards you. That's a talent, because not everybody has that. Right? And so it's a matter of just kind of making a list of what are things that you like doing. And if you're stuck, then ask a friend. They'll
Yep.
tell you, ask a family member. They're like, well,
Yep.
you always are coming over
Right.
making some gumbo and
Right.
it's good and or
Yeah.
making some kind of meal and there's just
Yeah.
didn't seem like we had any kind of food to eat.
Yeah.
But you know how
Yeah.
to make something out of nothing.
Yeah.
So your friends and family will tell you what you're good
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So two thoughts there. I've always struggled, probably up until the last 10 years or so, really with like, what am I good at? Like, I studied PR in undergrad and I didn't finish grad school. And so that's some imposter syndrome. We'll talk about that another day. But I always felt like I was a jack of all trades, but really I was kind of just like a generalist. And what I learned the second half of my career was what I'm really good at is organizing people. I'm
Mm,
super duper, like it's the best thing that it's the number one thing. There's nothing that I do better than that. And so that made me really, really focus on development and learning and development, because if I can organize people on a task, on a project, on an initiative, I can help you organize your mind so that you can excel. And so
mhm,
for the next 45 years of my life, that's what I'm going to be doing every day, every single day is that. And so when I think about that, and I think about the importance of that, one of my clients, she is trying to transition from one corporate organization to another corporate organization. And one of the challenges that she had was trying to figure out how to sell herself, and then
mhm,
trying to figure out how to sell herself, and then try to figure out how to spin off that and even do a small gig while transitioning to a bigger organization. And
mhm,
so I challenged her, Melanie, and I said, the way that you're applying for jobs is the exact same thing when you're trying to apply yourself to yourself. You go through your own resume, you document the things that you're good at, you highlight similarities, and you put dates and times to them. Then that's your story. So how you're
mhm,
selling yourself to corporate organization B is the same way that you're going to sell yourself when you're trying to deploy your necklace line or whatever, whatever it is that she was interested in doing. I think she's trying to write a book. So I think that's really important, because in my practice, oftentimes my clients are interested in making a move from A to B and thinking that they have to start from scratch, when really it's all in what you already have in yourself. It is using your existing knowledge and just being inquisitive. And if you can't be self-inquisitive, to your point, as a friend, as a family member. So please, guys,
mhm.
start there. You want to build your own brand, you want to monetize yourself, start with a blank sheet of paper and write all the good things about yourself, and it will just come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Another good exercise, this is what I encourage people to do before they list out their net worth, is
Mm-hmm.
list out their personal net worth. So you have a financial net worth, which is the
Mm-hmm.
numbers, then you have a
Mm-hmm.
personal net worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to list 100 things that you have done successfully over your lifetime. So it could be naturally your degrees, your awards, and all of that. But also, like once you start getting down to, you're at 50 and 51, list the things that you have done that you've never told anybody. Like, you know, helping somebody fix their tire when you were on
Mm-hmm.
your way to work, or
Mm-hmm.
um, you said something nice to an elderly person that just
Mm-hmm.
made them smile and beam, or, nobody knows that you volunteer at the homeless shelter,
Mm-hmm.
4 times a
Mm-hmm.
year, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's those types of things too
Mm-hmm.
that is a part of your personal net worth. It's a part of who
Mm-hmm.
you are.
Mm-hmm. I love
Be sure
that.
to add that stuff too.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that. That is super awesome. I'm gonna use that for myself. Um, I love what you said earlier about wealth and how it's not political. It doesn't have a color. We're all born with it and all of that. And I'd love to go deep, especially in the times that we're in a little bit, and talk a little bit about that, because many folks that look like us, they think of wealth very differently and don't even think they're in comparison, and they don't even realize that there are some things that they could be doing to grow their wealth, but feeling intimidated because they feel like that's for a different type of American, let's say that. So
Yeah,
I love your thoughts on that.
absolutely. That's actually why I started writing my book, or why I wrote my book. The book focuses on us culturally and spiritually, right? And sometimes we think money and spirituality are mutually exclusive, but they're not. When you begin to understand really what wealth consists of your mental wealth, your spiritual wealth, your emotional wealth, your relationships. I'm missing one. I'm not getting on the financial one yet, but there's one more out there.
Okay.
Actually, there's multiple levels, I should
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
about
yeah,
12 of them,
yeah.
of wealth, but there's like 5 ones that I focus on. So mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, um, and I think relationships. I think I added one in there. So when you understand that, you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have good relationships with people, then how are you going to enjoy that kind of wealth just on the top of a mountain by yourself, right? If you don't have the physical, wealth, like you're not eating right, you're not exercising, then you're trying to get to the airport and you're hustling and bustling and out of, and winded and you miss your flight, right?
In there,
No
yes.
matter how much money, you have, yeah, you can get another flight, but doggone it, how are you
Mm-hmm,
gonna be able
mm-hmm,
to enjoy,
mm-hmm,
hang gliding or
mm-hmm,
parasailing or all that kind of
mm-hmm.
stuff, and you're 337 pounds,
Pounds.
right?
Yeah,
Taking
yeah, yeah,
medication day in and day out,
yeah,
or you can't even
yeah,
go.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
think about the importance of our mental health, right? I've recently learned that women hold stress in their womb. And our eggs, like we hold the eggs of how is it? Our grandmother held our eggs, right? So when you think about the atrocities that we've
Ooh.
experienced as people of color, it's almost like how in the heck have we survived all this time?
Surviving.
And in many
Yes,
cases thrived,
yes, yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes,
it's
yes.
in our DNA to
Mm-hmm,
survive and to
mm-hmm,
thrive,
mm-hmm,
right? And
mm-hmm.
so the more we begin to understand the importance of maintaining sound mental health, which
Yes.
is incorporating self-care, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it
If
is.
if a part of your self-care is getting your nails done, don't take that out of your budget when you're
That's right.
itemizing your expenses,
That's
because
right.
that's the time when the kids are over there. You have your
Mm-hmm,
hour and a half to
mm-hmm,
focus on yourself
mm-hmm,
and to replenish so that you can handle, you
mm-hmm,
know, your children, right? Your
mm-hmm,
spouse, all that good
mm-hmm,
stuff.
mm-hmm,
So mental health is important. Spiritual health, right?
mm-hmm,
Spiritual wealth, health and wealth, it's
mm-hmm,
almost the same
mm-hmm.
synonymous,
It
right?
is. It is.
So how we have been able to thrive is by having a solid grounding of whose we are. Whether
Mm-hmm,
you're on the religious front or you're
mm-hmm,
more on a spiritual level and you
mm-hmm,
understand the universal laws,
mm-hmm,
regardless,
mm-hmm.
it's a spiritual understanding. And when
Yes.
you know that, then the realities of your wealth, your inner wealth, makes it more logical to begin to monetize that into its outer equivalent, which is the financial piece. So
Yes.
when you know yourself spiritually
Yes.
and you have managed yourself mentally, so you incorporate
Yes.
self-care activities, you get into nature, you take your shoes off, you
Yes.
ground, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you
Yes.
exercise those types of things and you're mindful of what you put in your
In
mouth.
your
Not
mouth.
everything has to taste good,
That's
right?
right.
Because you
Right.
know that mushroom or that bitter, herb is going to help cleanse and detox. Then you take it without the sugar,
That's right.
right? Everything doesn't
Right.
have to be,
Have to be sugared. Right.
sweet and sweetened
Yes.
up. You drink that tea straight.
Right. Right.
So, you eat for health, not always for taste, right? So when we
Right.
begin to incorporate these types of things, it just enhances our overall mental capabilities and our physical capabilities, and it enhances our inner wealth so that
That's
we're
right.
more capable to handle trials and tribulations and transgressions that happen,
Mm-hmm.
in society and without, and all the stuff that's going on
I
right
love that.
now. You
Yes.
know, I don't know if you remember that image that was going around the internet where there was a lion that was just roaring really strong,
Mm-hmm.
and then a monkey that was like,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things like, you
Mm-hmm.
can't steal my joy.
Right. That you can't do
You
like
can't.
I'm right. You can't, I'm unbothered.
Right, right. So I tell people all the time, your present circumstances do not dictate your future outcome, right? So understanding that although the wealth that we see out there, which is what is shifting, and I personally feel it's imploding. The current powers that be are creating situations for themselves to implode. This is a grand opportunity for us to ride for the chocolate
Tell me
cream
more.
to rise to
Tell
the top.
Yes, let's go chocolate cream. So tell us why we're on the verge of imploding, and give us an example of how we can rise.
Well, we've already been doing it. Over the 25 years I've been in the industry, and it's been happening long before then, I've seen a spiritual revolution happen all over the world. We're becoming much more present and aware of the spiritual aspect and the universal laws, and how religion has a tendency to kind of limit and confine, our true essence and ability. I'm not
That's right.
knocking religion. I was grown
Absolutely.
Christian, AME, I go
Yes.
for mine. But
Yep.
I have expanded and embraced more of a spiritual understanding, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand the 12 universal laws, and I'm learning them more and more,
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
time. Never
Mm-hmm.
end up learning. So, so with that being said, and I think spirituality is actually the core, because spirituality, when you know whose you are, then you know who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you know who you are, then other people can't affect you in the same way,
Oh
right?
man, that's so
That's that
true.
lion versus, that the monkey,
Yes.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? So a
Yeah.
lot of your present circumstances, insufficient fund fees, not having that check clear, getting laid off, getting a parking ticket, all of these types of things, being able to pay your bills or not pay your bills. It's like, well, that you're on the path of improving your financial situation. So don't let all that kind of stuff, credit card notices, collection calls, all that kind of stuff, don't let it rack up your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Because when when you let anxiety settle in,
Mm-hmm.
then it's going to be hard to make decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of taking that deep
Mm-hmm.
breath, right? And taking a moment to just assess, okay, this is all the stuff that's going on with me that I need to create some order around. These are the talents, the skills, the ways in which I can monetize. This is the resume I'm going to submit to get to the next business, or to get to the next higher level of employment. This is the strategy that I'm going to take in order to start my business. You start planning and strategizing, right? And you know that at the end of the day, you will win. That's the energy that you go with all the time. With all of the other stuff going on, at the end of the day, you will win. And as long as you're putting forth the effort on that goal, all that other stuff will calm down. Because when you give energy to it, it's going to be there. The calls will increase. But when you don't give energy to it, and you know that I'm working on it, I
Mm-hmm.
know you exist,
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on it, you'd be
Mm-hmm.
surprised
Mm-hmm.
as to how all of that just kind of, it's
Mm-hmm.
there.
Almost
It doesn't
evaporates,
go
right?
away,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it doesn't gnaw at your ear as it
That's
may
right.
have in the past. Now, when you look at how, and this is an area that I'm still studying, but when you look at various empires,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then when various empires, explode or come to their demise, you're getting what we're experiencing right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a lot of kind of panic button, movements. It just doesn't make sense,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And
Mm-hmm.
the folks
Mm-hmm.
are realizing that they let their ego get ahead of them and didn't planned to, they're positioned well. And
Mm-hmm.
so you have other countries who have taken the lead, recognize, okay, they're over there thinking they're all that in a bag of chips.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get our stuff straight
Mm-hmm.
and position ourselves to overpower them
Mm-hmm.
economically, because there's no
Mm-hmm.
wars or anything, prayerfully,
Right.
And so China has definitely done that. In 20 years, they have completely adjusted their infrastructure. They have created alliances with Mother Africa. And Mother Africa, we need to reconnect, connect, and perhaps,
Absolutely.
move, maybe
Absolutely.
have moved
Yes.
already over there. But we
Yes.
definitely need to create alliances and establish our businesses and trades, directly. And the powers that be are experiencing it. They're recognizing they can't you can't hold a person down forever. At some point, they're gonna loosen up from that chokehold because knowledge starts to come in, right? And when you look at the enslavement process back in the 1400s, the first round of folks resisted. There's numerous queens that I'm learning that I'm not even going to jumble over their names, but there's numerous queens that I'm learning about that fought them off for decades, right? But it had to take decades to beat us down. And then a whole lot of trickery had to happen. And then when you recognize that you couldn't, physically beat us down, then you had to use trickery and illness and weaken us in order to overpower us.
Absolutely.
Right? And then over time, as you separate the children and you
Separate the families.
the families, but what do you call it when you tell somebody something? Brainwash. When you start brainwashing, the children and telling them they're no good, and that happens over generation, and you don't know your past, you don't know your elders, then you get to an extent what we are as African Americans, and I would say the Black diaspora, and then you incorporate some other ideology on top of all of that. Well, then you get a whole lot of mixed information. And then when we start reading and Facebooking and sharing TikToks and
Masterminding. Mm-hmm.
and going to Googling, various things, you're like, oh, wait a minute,
Hold up.
And then people are tired. The people in Mali have kicked out the French.
Oh, wow. I
They're
did not know
like,
that.
yeah. So there's so many African nations that are like, you know what, Europeans, get the out.
Out.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Don't worry about it. If we have to kind of, sacrifice a little bit to get the understanding of the infrastructure together. Bulani, oh goodness. There is a country in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Fasa, Bitani Fasa, I think it is. He's the president, or I don't know what the term is, but he's the leader
Mm-hmm.
of Burkina Faso. That's the country, or his name. Lord have mercy. I'm gonna get it right one day. But anyway, Google it.
Right.
So he basically paid off all the debt, because that's how Europeans maintain a chokehold. You think, oh, how come Africans can't get it together? Why are they always so poor and all that? Well, when you create, when you suck out all the minerals, all the wealth, because you wouldn't be over there if there wasn't anything for you to take, right? But when you suck out all the wealth, and then you don't allow the country to benefit from the wealth that you sucked out, and you don't allow the country to feed themselves, like, have their own farms and create infrastructure,
Sustainability. Mm-hmm.
sustainability, and then you force them to have to import your food,
Mm-hmm.
for them to eat, but then
Mm-hmm.
you make the cost of it so high,
Mm-hmm.
and then in order to prevent the country from connecting with other countries, you impose a debt and
Mm-hmm.
you start doing all
Mm-hmm.
these shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you make the
Mm-hmm.
country,
Mm-hmm.
the people of the country
Mm-hmm.
poor,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the richness of the
Mm-hmm.
country.
Do you think that that is when you refer to the imploding and you think about where we are right now, do you feel like that is what's happening to us in our society as Black Americans?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why, thank you for getting me back on point. That's why we need to understand our value, understand our wealth, and act accordingly. Because the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity is right, and the opportunity is creating, more and more space right in front of us. And so
Mm-hmm.
when all of these, laws and um, uh, um, what is Trump doing right now?
The tariffs,
Well, not the
the
tariffs, but
tariffs.
the adjustment of the budget.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah,
creating tax
yeah,
cuts and loopholes and stuff.
yeah,
Benefit from it.
yeah.
Don't fight
How?
against it.
How?
Well, how is start your business and start your business from the perspective of I'm making $100,000 a month. Yes. Start from
Why a
that
hundred thousand
vein.
dollars a month?
Hey, why $10,000 a month? Why $1,000 a month? The point is don't sell yourself short. Because if you're going to monetize your inner wealth into its outer equivalent, there's really no number for that.
Hmm.
So why
Hmm.
not start high?
Hmm.
That's going to take you a minute from where you are right now to get 200, but have the plan in mind that that's where you want to
The
go.
scalability of it, right? Right.
Yeah. And that particular point right there is scalability.
Mm-hmm.
So understand that you want to create a company that is scalable.
Mm-hmm.
So I started making jewelry because it was a extracurricular self-care thing for me so I could
Mm-hmm.
kind of decompose from all the financial planning analysis and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not scalable for me to make jewelry myself all the time. So
Right.
I'd have to hire, people to do it and then actually back out and get into design. Well, truth be, I didn't want to do that because
Right.
that's, what it is. But the point of understanding scaling means that are you just going to do your business as a hobby? Is
Mm-hmm.
it just
Mm-hmm.
a craft? Or are you trying
Mm-hmm.
to run a business?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you're trying to determine, well, how do we, take advantage of these tax cuts? How do we, benefit from being developers versus consumers, of
Mm-hmm.
things? Well, you have to understand how money works,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
understand how money works from a perspective of how you can add value, which
Mm-hmm.
again goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You don't have to align with how they have created wealth because that's not you anyway. We create things to add value and to provide a quality service and benefits to others. And that also to help ourselves because we're going to get the exchange of the money so that we can do things, right? But we don't create things from a selfish, vantage point. So, with things imploding, I believe, in the way that they are, there's a new economy that can emerge. And there's a lot of discussion about a well-being economy, which is woman-led,
Oh, surprise.
right? So there's countries that are already, incorporating this, Costa Rica, Norway, Venezuela, I think, so it exists. It's not like, you have to kind of create it. So it's really a matter of us beginning to understand how money works, understand how economics works, the current economics of capitalism that we're dealing with, and then new ways of how economies can work, which is again that well-being economy, and begin to position ourselves accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take time, but I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you this is something else that is interesting, and this is a story. So,
Yes, I love me a good story.
so A.G. Gatson developed, created a motel during the Jim Crow era. And he got the idea of creating this motel when he was in Oxford, England, at a AME conference. And so, you know, there he heard that the Baptist Convention wanted to host their next convention in Birmingham, Alabama. Well, in the 1950s, Jim Crow was cracking, and there weren't not too many accommodations for us, right? So he got one of this, and he talked to his wife Minnie and was like, "What do you think about developing a motel, to accommodate folks at the Baptist Convention?" She was like, "Sounds good." So upon their return back from the conference, he started researching various motels and came across the Holiday Inn and was like, "I like this model, going to use this model." So he got all of the financing and everything together, and the architect and all of that. And so by 1954, June 30th of 1954, his doors were open and ready to receive the folks from the Baptist Convention. Now that happened in under 4 years. We have this current administration for the next 4 years, assuming other stuff doesn't happen, but that's another story. But we've got 4 years. In this day and age, you can make $1 million in under a year with the proper structure and plan in place. Think about this. This is what I help people to understand. In order to make $1 million, what kind of product or service can you sell, for like $97, right? So you have a product, let's say $197. So $197 means that you need 5,076 people to buy it. Out of the entire world, do you feel that you can connect with 5,076 people? Now that's gross. I'm not talking about taxes and expenses, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do. I'm following.
Right?
I'm following. Absolutely.
5,000 people, and that's $197 product. So if you have a product or a service that's $5,000 or $1,000, right? Then that's even a lower amount of people that you have to connect with. And then the fact that we're in a digital age, what digital product can you create that's going to provide value to people? The digital era, the e-commerce, is off the charts in terms of how lucrative it is.
It is.
Right?
Yes.
And you'd be surprised how many people are creating digital products, and you're like, you sold how many of that?
That right. They're clicking on your stuff. Wow.
Yeah.
Like it gives you perspective, and it reduces the imposter syndrome about how to create your wealth when you can see it done and the ease of it. You might not agree with the product, or you might not like it, you may not be a consumer of it, but you can appreciate the art of it. Being able to scale like that is super important in this time. Good point.
Absolutely. So the how is first recognizing you can do it, you can win, and having that energy all throughout the challenges that you will experience, because life does not exist without challenges. It's just a part of nature, right? So you start with that. Then you begin to surround yourself with people that are going to help you get there, because your financial village being empty is not going to help you excel. Nobody gets anywhere by themselves. Nobody. That's why people are people. People need people to move forward, right? In anything.
Absolutely.
So you begin to connect with people that that are going to help you get to the next level. So if you're starting a business, that's the SBA, that's SCORE, it's the financial advisor, it's a CPA, it's a bookkeeper, it's a estate planner, it's an attorney, it's your banker, right? You need to have a relationship with your banking institution, right? So it's all of those things. And then it's other business owners. So it's connecting with associations. It's getting into, like, if you're in my industry, there's a financial planning association, I'm a member of. So I can be around other financial, advisors and get kind of an idea of what everyone is doing and making sure I'm on par or exposed to various, changes in legislations and things like that, right? So it's a matter of being around your own community within the business and the industry business.
Absolutely.
So it's all of that. That's the how.
That's the how. Oh my gosh.
The
Okay.
beginning of the how.
That's the beginning of the how. So you have all of these tools that you've used to, I'm assuming, grow and scale your businesses, and you teach people how to do this. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
So I don't necessarily teach people how to start businesses,
Sure.
but I teach people about money, which relates to you starting a business.
Yes.
So at Zillionaire Enterprises, it's a financial literacy and education company where I focus on women and children to basically understand how money works, right? And so a lot of that has to deal with just some of the basic fundamentals. Where's the money coming from and where is it going? Which another way to put that is, what's your budget, right? Your cash flow. Then to understand where to put it. You know, do you have clear, purposeful, intentional accounts as to where you're saving your money and why, right? When you have a clear purpose for each and every dollar as to why you're spending it, which is now is more important than ever, right? We want to spend our dollars with people that we value, with companies that value us, right? We want to buy clothes that are not toxic, food that doesn't have chemicals in it, right? So we want to be very, very intentional and purposeful with every dollar we spend and every dollar we save, so that we have rules of engagement, right? Because if you're like me, Coach Fatima, and many other people, if you know that you have some money saved and a friend or a family member is like, hey, I'm running kind of low, I need some help, or I'm in a bind, can you help me? You're going to be like, yeah. But at a certain point, we have to say no.
We do.
So by having a clear purpose and a plan for every single dollar that is saved helps you help them in the sense of you have now rules of engagement. You have boundaries, right? You have to put the mask on yourself first before you put on somebody else. It's that same principle. So you want to apply those types of rules with your money as well. So let's say that you have what I call a dip account. You have money saved of, let's say, $5,000 there a month of your expenses, and you get down to 2,500, then you can't help anybody
That's right. It's as simple as that.
That's your zero, right? And so you create a financial foundation, you create rules of engagement, and then that's when you get to the next level, which is generating income. And there's 3 different types of income. You have portfolio income, passive income, and active income. So the active income is what we want to minimize. Active income means that we're physically exerting energy to generate it. That's a W-2 income, and that's what Donald and his friends and his cronies are not supporting. So that's another reason why I encourage people that what you want to do is you want to get in business and you want to invest. Those are the 2 key areas, right?
Yes.
That's where the IRS and the tax laws focus.
Favor. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, y'all.
So then how do we begin to get into that framework and mindset? You might have to stick with the W-2 for a minute to create some stability as you're focused on building, right?
Yes.
But the idea is you're focused on building, yes? And so ultimately, it's to mitigate that active income and focus on the passive and portfolio income, which could be real estate, it could be business, different types of investments.
Portfolio is the real estate?
Yeah, portfolio is the real estate and publicly traded companies.
Okay.
I can say that.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, so those are the types of things, I educate people on in terms of how do you build wealth? What does that look like? Because a lot of times, you hear all these things out here, but it's like, but what does that look like? How is that going to relate to me? And then also recognize that your definition of wealth is your definition of wealth in terms of financial wealth. So if you want that multi-billion-dollar business and create an empire, go for it. The sky's the limit. If that's beyond what you feel like doing and you just, want your house paid off, I shouldn't say just, and you want your house
that's
paid
a big
off
deal. Yeah.
and send your kids to college with no debt, then that's a fantastic goal as well.
Absolutely.
There's no, judgment or criticism around how you choose to define your idea of success and financial wealth.
Yes.
Right?
I love
So
that.
understand that too. So those are the types of things, that I help, people with. And I would say 80% of what I do is financial therapy. 20% is all that stuff I was just talking about. But it's the emotion, it's the imposter syndrome. It's the ability to get over yourself, in terms of those hurdles that we place and
Yeah.
all the conversations, the negative conversations that we roll around in our head every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I help people to, change their paradigm, because I'll hear it and then I'll translate it in a way that's like, I
hadn't thought about it like that.
Right. Because we're so
Guilty.
ingrained with the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and you're 40 years old, you're 50 years
You
old.
haven't done it yet, you're not going to be able to do it. Yeah.
All of that. When in reality, if I may conclude with this story, in the Yoruba culture, adulthood starts at 40.
Woo! That got my attention. Yeah.
So if you think about it, it makes total sense. When you're in your 20s, how many wise, smart decisions, does the average 20-year-old make, right? And then your brain doesn't even fully develop until you're 25. So now we're 30. Okay, so we've got about a decade of being free from mom and dad for a little bit. So we've got in our career a little bit. Okay, we're all right, but you're still figuring yourself out. You've got some little roots that have kind of settled in, but that core root hasn't established yet. By the time we're 40, it's like, okay, been in my industry, my career for a good 20 years, a generation.
Yeah.
I know myself even more, and it's a point in life where you've got enough behind you to have some good grounding, and you've got a whole lot of head in front of you.
Yes.
Able to use all of that and expand to the next best version of yourself. And when you're eating food for nutrition and not taste, and you're exercising regularly, and you're incorporating self-care, so you're mentally, together, then at 40, you've got a good 60 years of life, of joyful life to live. And if you're 50, you've got another 50 years or more. Even 60, 40 years. So when we talk about the ability to make money in the palm of our hand these days, the ability to communicate with somebody in Dubai without any time delay, right? Which is incredible. We can create a digital product and sell 5,000 units of that. And you make $1 million. We can create wealth in such a shorter period of time now more than ever.
Which is why our time is now.
Yes.
Do not delay. Do not delay. Do not delay. So
somebody wants what you have to offer.
Everyone wants. This conversation was extremely powerful, and this is one of many. This is the beginning of us. I am so excited. As we wrap, I'd love for you to take us home with how can people reach you and learn more about, I'll start from the beginning, the invest, save, spend.
The basics, right?
The basics, the debunking of what wealth is to you, right? That's another layer. And I would love for folks to be able to learn more about how to take control of the here and now and recognize their gifts. To your point, your specialty is not, I'm going to show you how to set up a digital product, but your specialty is teaching about the financial implications of setting up digital products. So how can folks get to you?
Yes. So you can reach me just about on every social media outlet from Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Zillionaire. And Zillionaire is zeal. So that's Zeallion So zillionaire is a person that has the tenacity, the fever, the drive to be able to recognize their talents and to monetize them accordingly. So that's the zeal in zillionaire.
I love it so much. I am so happy to be a part of your tribe of zillionaires. Very recently, we cemented our relationship. So
Yes.
I'm a zillionaire, or however you want to put that in a noun for me. I'm yours. I'm really excited and terrified, y'all, of this next stage in my life where I thought I had 45 more years, but I think I got like 50 or 60 years based on what you just shared with me. And I appreciate you guys being on the journey with me. This is Fraudulent Feelings with Fatima, Imposter Wealth. Thank you, Melanie Perry, for joining me. It's
Thank
such
you.
a pleasure to have you on with us. And until next time, see you soon.